Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 1 is so frustrating. There is a clear, obvious, and growing threat of White Walkers approaching on all of the characters, everyone in the entire world for a fact. And yet, they bicker. They fight like children, focusing most of their concern around politics and who's going to keep their power. What's worse is that when Jon does speak up and brings up the more pressing concern that will affect everyone in a drastic way, he's the one that actually gets talked down to like he's an idiot. And it's not like characters like Sansa don't know the White Walkers are coming. They're very aware. The evidence is overwhelming. This problem isn't just one in the future, it's also affecting people already. The White Walkers have already caused a lot of harm. It just hasn't been right here, right now, in places like King's Landing. And it's not just any normal person, it's the poorest people in Westeros, the wildlings who have no government, no structure, no advantages from capital built over generations and a build-up of a society to combat this. They're the most vulnerable to this expansion. And sure, Cersei doesn't care about those people, she's pretty apathetic to them, which is not great, but you can understand she doesn't care about them. But she should care that she's next, like it's definitely coming. Not only is it increasingly going to affect her life, but it's going to exponentially affect her life negatively the longer she waits about jumping in and actually dealing with it. If early on in the story everyone had stopped denying reports from Jeor Mormont and others and had got their armies to the wall and were ready there, then they could have prevented even before the first hurdle fell. And sure, people would be affected still because the problem had started growing before awareness was truly spread amongst people in a way that they should have picked up on the evidence. But they could have minimized damage to a point where it was like only a minor inconvenience to the realm. They could have had 1 million soldiers in the war with fire arrows and dragon glass and everything would be fine. They wouldn't lose anyone, really. Apart from the poor souls of the wildlings who had to deal with the issue first because they lived in the most vulnerable areas. Now, I'm putting a lot of focus on Cersei and these noblemen because they're in the position of power, so they should have the most responsibility to actually tackle this. But the everyday folk of Winterfell are just as responsible for avoiding this issue and not challenging their leaders to unify and work together. These people are in a time of need and emergency, so Dany coming with her armies and her aid should be something for them to rejoice and be happy with. But they're stuck in the mindset of the previous era, not realizing they don't have that luxury anymore. I can empathize with the characters about how they see this emergency of the White Walkers as very inhuman and different to what they're used to. They have to rethink and restructure every way they have their society. The noble class, the divisions between houses, who rules, how they work together, the geopolitics of everything. It's a very difficult and complex issue for people to get their heads around, especially when they're uneducated, deliberately misled, and their leaders aren't addressing it themselves. But now the information is getting out with expert opinions like Samwell Tarly, and we've got activists like Jon who are going out there and getting whites and bringing them to the public and showing them in front of these people things should be ramping up, the emergencies should be setting in, but it's still not. But even in Season 8, when things are getting to the most dire point, they are still delaying their responses, focusing on the wrong issues, betraying each other, at each other's throats, snapping when they need to be unifying. Sadly, at this point, they have to be making giant changes to how they organize their entire lives. I don't know how they could write these characters this way. This would never happen in a real society of people who actually want to improve their futures, who want to lift up their lives, who care about their fellow man. Like, how could this ever possibly happen? Why would they think this could be a possible theme they could go down in this fantasy show? It's just so unrealistic, so unreal.